The American Rescue Plan met the moment, and it has put us in a place where we can actually put us in a place where the American people feel we can take on inflation. In order to take this on, we got to have be in a good historic economic place, which is where we are right now.
Now, we don't think the White House is fooling anyone here, and we'll show you why in just a second. But before we do that, let's welcome in Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. She represents New York's 22nd District. She's also a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And like all Americans, I know she and her constituents are feeling this and probably having a hard time buying that from Jean-Pierre, aren't you, Congresswoman?
Yeah, she's not a great spokesperson for Biden right now, just putting out these word salads that are incomprehensible, talking about how she can't even keep up with them, which was a recent one. And I find that hard to believe. I mean, they really are spinning because they know this is a problem. You don't see candidates out there jockeying for position to get Joe Biden's endorsement like they are, say, for President Trump, who's been pretty successful in major primaries. Now, he's had some losses. But I mean, I look at President Biden and he just continues to just outright lie to the American people. We know how it feels. I mean, when I go to fill up my tank of gas and I hit the $100 limit, which I've never done before until now, and it's over $5 a gallon in parts of New York State and even higher across the country, when the rates of inflation are so high that people are making hard decisions about whether to actually drive somewhere, get to work, put gas in their car, and actually think about what they're going to do, as everyone's 401k is just cratering, like we once saw back when President Obama was in office.
Yeah.
People are hurting across the country, and to just continue to say that he's bringing record jobs in. Look, bringing people back to work after they lost their jobs because of the shutdowns and the pandemic is not creating new jobs. We are seeing a supply chain problem and a difficulty in getting people to actually get to work so that we can produce the goods and services we have, because we don't have the ability to even pay for
the writing is all over. The writing is all over the wall about this pending recession. They don't want to admit it, but several economists are talking about it. The stock market data seems to indicate that we're headed in that direction. And as it refers to can't keeping up with the president, we know that's kind of true, actually, because he's talking about defending Taiwan. They have to go back and correct the record, and then they have to put out a statement saying, oh, nobody corrects the record, Joe Biden's record, unless he says it's okay. Again, like you said, no one's buying this from the White House. And, I think we can look at some poll numbers here to prove that the American public isn't buying this either. Take a look at this. The latest numbers we have from Rasmussen: 60% disapprove, 38% approve. I also want to take a listen to something that a DNC member said about Joe Biden. This is a former chair of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party, Steve Simonus, on CNN.
If you look at the polls with regards to the direction of the country, less than a quarter of Americans think that our country is on the right track. With polls like that, people are going to be looking for a change candidate. They're not going to be looking to vote for an incumbent with approval ratings down in the 30s.
And that really is one of those data points that really matters. We talk about polls and how they can be all over the place sometimes, but when that many people feel like the country is headed in the wrong direction, they got to make a change at the ballot box.
Yeah, you're also seeing an intensity of Republican voters. So I think they're coming out in record numbers across the nation to vote in primaries because they are very anxious about getting candidates in place who are going to fix this. And the one thing that's out there that I think, alluding to President Biden's trip to Saudi Arabia, is the energy crisis. This energy issue is really front and center. And Biden has completely continued this war on energy. It's New York has been the same way where I reside. We had a New York's version of the Green New Deal is really exacting damage on New York State already. And then Biden shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. I'm just surprised he's getting standing ovations, other than there maybe for sympathy or people feel sorry for him, because that shut down a number of union jobs, and unions want good paying jobs. They want to have the opportunities to build in the energy sector. So the energy is what's driving all of this. If we were to just become energy independent, drive down the price of energy, that would actually give us some relief when it comes to inflation and the job and supply market change that we're seeing.
Yeah, like I was asking James Rosen, I wonder what the ovation would be or what the response would be if you went to a union hall in Middle America someplace, not at the convention hall where they have this big annual meeting of all the bigwigs from the union. What does the average working class man or woman think about Joe Biden right now. We have the poll numbers to prove that. I also want to talk about the president's age, because this is also now being talked about openly among Democrats. Remember, there's how dare you talk about this stuff. But here's David Axelrod, former chief campaign strategist for President Obama. He told the New York Times, quote, "The presidency is a monstrously taxing job, and the stark reality is that the president would be closer to 90 than 80 at the end of his second term, and that would be a major issue." And I don't know if you remember this joke from comedian Dennis Miller. This was during the Reagan administration when he was running for re-election. Take a listen to what Dennis Miller said about President Reagan.
Reagan, our president, 77 at the end of this next term, 77, and he has access to the button. You know, my grandfather's 77. We won't let him use the remote control for the TV set, okay?
You know, Joe Biden is not Ronald Reagan, right? He didn't fix the inflation problem yet, like Reagan had at that point when he was running for re-election. He hadn't really accomplished anything. Biden hasn't accomplished anything on the foreign policy stage. Reagan had at that point. You know, age might just be a number, but it's much bigger, I guess, for Joe Biden than it maybe has been for any other president before, based on what we've seen so far.
I think age is not the issue. It's his cognitive decline based on health issues he's had in the past, and it's showing. There are very vibrant 80-year-olds and even 90-year-olds who I know who probably could do an excellent job as president. It's the question of this particular president's ability to do the job at his age. And, you know, I think back on allowing that I remember when Dennis Miller made that comment about Ronald Reagan. But remember something about Ronald Reagan. He was a poor guy who was a self-made man. Right. And rose to the presidency. And that tends to be the kind of person who's most successful. Joe Biden is a lifelong career politician who has never really had to make a payroll or do anything like running a business, understanding the suffering. Like, I know what I used to go through when running our business, just trying to make payroll, just trying to pay off, you know, accounts receivable, and just so we could keep our business going. He doesn't have that kind of acuity, and he never has. And he's always been able to win in elections where his incumbency has gotten him there. So he doesn't have that independence to be able to really make good decisions in hard times that we're experiencing now. He's got a shadow government behind him that seems to be making all these decisions, which is why you're seeing him sort of making these utterances, whether it's about Taiwan and other foreign policy and domestic issues, where they keep walking it back because the shadow government doesn't want to have anything happen the way that Joe Biden might remember it from 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, Reagan doesn't
when he was much more of a bipartisan, less far left person, and he was supposedly a moderate back in the day.
Right. The guys that the Republican senators used to reach across the aisle to work with, that's not the Joe Biden we've seen. And the other thing we've seen, too, is how frustrated the far left progressives are with Joe Biden because he can't deliver on what they want based on his poor performance and the performance of the economy right now. He's taken heat from all sides, as well he should. That's what happens when the country is in a state like it's in right now. Congresswoman, great to see you again, as always. Take care.
Thank you. Great to see you.